David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The list of people who believe that Donald Trump is not going to relinquish control of the White House peacefully if he loses the 2020 election is growing, and it includes at least one Republican candidate now who happens to be running against Donald Trump. His name's William Weld. He is a former governor here in Massachusetts. He previously was running as a libertarian. He now is a Republican. And he says that Donald Trump will not leave voluntarily if he loses the 2020 election. From Real Time with Bill Maher asked, if Trump loses, do you think he'll leave? And William Weld said, not voluntarily. He'll have a run at saying it was a rigged game, so I'm not leaving. I don't think the military, and indeed even the Justice Department, the rank and file, the investigative agencies, would stand for that in this country. I like that William Weld added that last piece because it's important for us on the left, and not that William Weld is on the left, but for anyone on the left who is even entertaining this idea of what would Trump do? Would he try to hold on to control if he lost the 2020 election? We're not like the crazy right with the birther stuff and the Obama's going to cancel the 2016 election stuff, which is why I think it's important to point out that William Weld is not saying Trump would succeed at staying in the White House, even if he lost the 2020 election. He might try to pull it or try to delay it, but ultimately the centers of power in the country wouldn't allow it. And I also think that that's the most likely scenario. And every single time that this comes up, I go out of my way not to be hyperbolic, because with Obama, there was so much nonsense about Obama won't leave. Obama will cancel the 2016 election and declare himself indefinite president, or Obama will declare martial law as a justification for remaining president beyond his 8 years. We want to be as sober and realistic as possible about this. With Barack Obama, there was no indication whatsoever that Barack Obama had those sort of anti-democratic authoritarian tendencies with regard to the presidency and trying to not relinquish power. There was nothing Obama said which suggested that he might, out of his own concoction, not accept the results of an election. So when the right said Obama won't leave, it was 110% BS. With Trump, it's not 110% BS. It's still not likely that it would happen, though, right? Trump has all the way back to 2016 in the debates said maybe he would accept the election results, maybe he wouldn't if they showed that he lost, depending on what he thinks about the election results. Trump has said president for life, like what China made possible recently, is interesting, and maybe we would try it sometime. Trump has said years ahead of the 2020 election, 2 years ahead, that the only way Democrats can defeat him in 2020 is via fraud. That is yet another one of these sort of pretexts to the idea that he might not accept the election results. Trump has lied about the validity of past elections. Remember, he claimed 3 to 5 million people voted illegally in 2016 for Hillary Clinton, and that in reality, if you account for those 3 to 5 million alleged illegal votes, he won the popular vote as well as the electoral vote. Trump has made clear that he has a degree of narcissism that might make him unable emotionally to accept defeat. So when people talk about Trump won't leave the White House peacefully if he loses, is it more likely that he would try to retain power than would someone like Barack Obama? Obviously, the answer is yes. Is it likely Trump would succeed if he tried at not relinquishing the White House? I don't think it's very likely. So what we need to do is let's just work on voting him out rather than focusing on whether or not he would leave. Let's work on preventing voter suppression and manipulation tactics to actually hand Donald Trump the victory, because much more likely than Trump loses and somehow stays in the White House is that the combination of voter ID laws and election machine tampering and foreign influence and reductions in voting hours and closures of polling places all together push Donald Trump into victory. That's what we need to most proactively be working to prevent. I agree with William Weld that if Trump tries not to give up control of the White House, that the forces of power, I know that the Justice Department's in the tank for him. I know all of that stuff, but I think that that would even be too far. I think that he would ultimately be removed. And there's a really big problem in American culture today, American political culture today, that this relates to. Expectations. Expectations aren't being managed properly. So take impeachment, for example, which we'll talk about. The expectation shouldn't be, can we remove Trump via impeachment by the 2020 election? Because that's not happening. The expectation should be, can impeachment proceedings expose the content of the Mueller report enough to damage Trump to make sure that he loses the 2020 election? We have to manage our expectations. And similarly, if Trump loses the 2020 election and tries to stay in power, could he actually do it? I believe William Weld is right, and the answer is no, that he would be removed. But he might try to argue that the election was bogus, that it was rigged, that it was fraudulent, whatever, because he's done it before. In an election he won, but who knows what he would do in an election that he loses. Last thing on this, the idea that the reason Trump would be so adamant about not losing has been floated as maybe being the statute of limitations on obstruction. There's this idea that Trump, it's not so much that he wants to be president for another 4 years, although his ego would take a hit if he were to lose, but it's the idea that if he is not president for another 4 years, he could end up indicted for obstruction because the statute of limitations would not have expired. There is a way around that, which would be if Trump loses the 2020 election 3 days before the inauguration of the next president, Trump resigns, Mike Pence becomes president and issues a preemptive pardon for Donald Trump. It might work, it might not. The legal experts have sort of different views on that, but there is a path, even if Trump loses in 2020, to protecting himself from indictment on obstruction after he's gone. Just something to keep in mind. There's lots of things about the world under Donald Trump that make me despair for humanity, or that make me worried, or that shock me or surprise me or whatever else. But one of the things that I really just straight up resent about the Trump administration is that it's forcing us to have to re-explain a lot of really simple concepts that I previously thought we sort of had a pretty firm grasp on that have apparently been thrown out the window under Donald Trump. So, for example, tariffs. I talked yesterday about tariffs extensively. China and Mexico don't pay for Donald Trump's tariffs. The American companies and the American people who import the stuff from China and Mexico are the ones actually paying for the tariffs. Voter fraud. We just talked about it in the first segment today. Doesn't matter what Trump and his followers say. In-person voter fraud to the tune of these 3 to 5 million illegal votes Donald Trump claims took place in 2016 doesn't exist. Okay, we've talked about it. All Brennan Center for Justice study. We know it's just not real, and we're having to re-explain this under Donald Trump. I could go on and give you a long list, but I want to focus in on one specific one today, which is that under Trump, since Trump's tax reform plan was put in place, all of a sudden people are pretending that his tax cut would go to the middle class, and that the part that goes to the rich is also good because it gives the economy more juice, so to speak. There's this idea that giving tax cuts to the rich stimulates the economy. It trickles down, all of that stuff. We've already dealt with this, okay? I've been dealing with it for years. We've been dealing with it on the program. Most recently, we dealt with it under George W. Bush. Tax cuts for the rich aren't particularly stimulative to the economy. And Republican tax plans mostly give disproportionate amounts of money to the rich and to big corporations, no matter what they tell you. And once again, that's what happened with the Trump Republican tax reform that was passed during Donald Trump's first term. There's a really great report from the Congressional Research Service called The Economic Effects of the 2017 Tax Revision, Preliminary Observations. You might remember we were told it would be great for all Americans. We were told it would let makers keep their money. It would incentivize businesses to invest more in their businesses and in their employees, which would cause wages to rise. It would stimulate economic growth. We were told that even though in the short term it would reduce the amount of money that the government takes in, that it would very quickly pay for itself because of all the growth and winning and all of this that would be created. And ultimately, the government would actually be taking in more money. None of it has happened. Wages have continued to increase slowly, but they're increasing at the same rate that they were increasing before the tax reform plan went into effect. Growth has continued on the same trend line as before the tax reform plan. But what did happen as a result of Trump's tax plan is lower the effective tax rate for the super rich by a significant percentage, and hugely in terms of the raw dollars that went back to the very rich relative to the middle class and the lower middle class and the poor. So Trump personally and his friends made out really, really well from this tax plan. What it did do was cause businesses to use the money not to reinvest in their own businesses or employees, but to start repurchasing shares of their own stock to drive up the price, which again is a way of using the money from the tax cuts to mostly help their big shareholders and their executives. It's almost like we knew this would happen when they first started talking about this type of tax reform, because this is how it happens every single time. And I want to be really clear. This is not me speaking out against the tax plan because I'm jealous that the tax plan was bad for me and good for other people. This tax reform was very good for me, okay? I did a whole segment several months ago when I had filed my taxes explaining how even though the David Pakman Show grew from 2017 to 2018, my effective tax rate as the majority owner of the David Pakman Show went down from 26% effective federal tax rate for the 2017 tax year, 26%, down to under 22% in 2018. I'll take the money, okay? But my point in talking about that, in talking about it again here, is that it is not economically stimulative in terms of policy to do the type of tax reform that saves me like 15% on taxes. 4 out of 26 is roughly about 15%. And disproportionately more going to the very, very rich and corporations who are saving the money, who are using the money to repurchase, to do stock buybacks, et cetera. Last thing, we call these the Trump tax cuts, but really they're Republican tax cuts. So if you're not happy with the tax reform plan, yes, Trump is to blame. And yes, Trump should be voted out in 2020. He supported the tax plan. He worked on the tax plan with Republicans. But it's the Republicans who wrote it and actually pushed it through in the House and Senate who are also responsible. And they should also be voted out in 2020. Really important not to forget that and blame this all on Trump, because it is much, much bigger than Donald Trump. Let me know what you think. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. I've got a nice announcement coming up later on the show today. Hope you'll stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's 2 new members of the day that I want to thank for supporting the David Pakman Show and just being all around great people are Catherine McRae and Sean Beetham. We have fortunately, and I'm so fortunate to be able to say this, we have had such an inflow of new members over the last year, and particularly over the last 6 months, that in order to try to start catching up, instead of thanking 1 new member a day, I'm doing 2. And today it's Catherine McRae and Sean Beetham. Also want to say thanks to Scott Blair. Scott Blair has been a member for almost 5 years, dating all the way back to 2015. Awesome. Join them at www.joinpakman.com. You get a daily members-only bonus show, commercial-free audio and video streams of the show, and the heartwarming knowledge that you are actually part of the solution to the media funding problem rather than an aggravating factor in the problem. You're supporting programs that you think are valuable and deserve to be supported. And we're talking about just a few bucks a month. www.joinpakman.com. Okay, I have a clip for you today that is notable not only for its absurdity and its stupidity, as much as it's notable for its truly xenophobic basis when you listen to what it is that Tucker Carlson said on his show the other day. In dismissing the idea that Russia interfered in the 2016 election, even though they did, even though the Mueller report makes that clear, even though our intelligence agencies all found that Russia interfered, Tucker Carlson did something sort of slick. I'll admit it's sort of slick, sort of ignorant, and it's very xenophobic, but it is a little bit slick. He said that the real election interference is Mexican people who legally became citizens of the United States and then voted, as is their right of citizenship. It's as ridiculous as it sounds. I'm going to play a clip for you where Tucker Carlson is apparently arguing that everything Russia did, for which we have endless evidence, is not interference in an election, but that Mexican people who come here legally, become citizens, and then choose to vote is a form of interference. Now, you've got to listen really carefully to the words that are used and what Tucker Carlson says here. Take a look.
Well, if you watched Robert Mueller speak this morning at 11, you heard him echo the view of official Washington that Russia had a major effect on the 2016 election. Well, as we've noted before, that is an absurd claim. There's zero evidence that it's true, none that Robert Mueller himself has presented. But if you're looking for countries that really do influence American politics, there are quite a few. Anyone who lives in D.C. can tell you that. Russia does not make the list. Mexico definitely does. At the beginning of the past presidential election cycle, for example, Mexico began what Bloomberg News described as an unprecedented effort to get American citizenship for its permanent residents living here in the U.S. The point was obvious, of course, to make them voters so they could vote to defeat Donald Trump. Russia never even considered election hacking that bold.
Tucker is suggesting here that Mexicans who meet the requirements to become citizens and then choose to vote are committing a type of interference in the election that is actually interference, unlike what Russia did in 2016. Number one, citizens voting is not interference in an election. It's called the election process, right? When people are citizens and they vote, that is not a way to interfere with the election. It is a way to participate in the election. The definition of interference is the action of interfering or the process of being interfered with. When American citizens vote, it's not interfering with the election process. It's the election process. When Russia meddles, accesses voting systems, helps one candidate get dirt on another, runs social media campaigns and trolling campaigns and fake news campaigns and disinformation campaigns online, that is not a main election process. Those are actions that are interfering with the election. When you get beyond that, you realize that this is fundamentally xenophobic, because the underlying motivation or implication here is that, well, yeah, of course, citizens get to vote here, but when it's brown people from Mexico who obtained citizenship through naturalization, it's not really part of the democratic process. It's an interference with the democratic process. Now, from a logistical standpoint, can you imagine this as a strategy to affect election results by Mexico? You're counting on people from Mexico coming to the United States legally, living here long enough to qualify to apply for citizenship, applying for citizenship, paying all of the associated costs, eventually getting that citizenship, all to vote in elections legally as a means to affect elections. It would be an incredibly stupid and inefficient way to try to affect the election results in the United States. And if you believe that, you would probably believe the idea, as many Trumpists do, that Barack Obama was part of a conspiracy that dates back to his birth to get a foreigner to be president of the United States, some kind of shadowy entity that I guess 45 years before Barack Obama became president faked a birth certificate to make sure that a foreign-born dude would be president in 2008 in the United States. They faked his parents. They faked the birth certificate. Who knows what the latest version of that conspiracy is? If you believe that, then I guess maybe you would believe that Mexicans having the long-term plan of becoming legal citizens in order to vote is a way to interfere and affect elections. Any normal, sensible, rational person would realize the absurdity of it. And as part of this kind of long game idea, you don't actually need to go to that Mexican conspiracy to understand the long game that Russia has been playing. I mean, go back to the 1997 book, Foundations of Geopolitics by Alexander Dugin, and you will see that everything Russia has been doing in the United States and elsewhere for the last several years was written out and suggested as a strategy for sowing geopolitical chaos to Russia's advantage more than 20 years ago in the book Foundations of Geopolitics. But listen, this is, if you're in Tucker Carlson's core Fox News audience, you probably hear this idea of Mexicans are interfering by legally becoming citizens and voting. It's probably a great fit for you, and it's probably the type of stuff that makes Tucker Carlson have those solid ratings on Fox News. Disgusting, absolutely disgusting, but I understand why Tucker Carlson's saying it, because his audience is eating it up like it's being spoon-fed to them. Let's talk about impeachment briefly. Support for impeaching Donald Trump has spiked to 41%, but I want to go through this carefully because there are different things that impeachment could mean. As you probably all know by now, because I keep mentioning it, impeachment is not the removal of the president. Impeachment is the process whereby the House says, we believe the president should be removed for these reasons, and we are filing articles of impeachment. It then is up to the Senate to vote to convict and remove the president. And these are two different processes. And a lot of people are interchangeably using the word impeachment to mean either start an impeachment inquiry, file articles of impeachment in the House, go through the investigative process of impeachment in the House, and actually vote to remove Trump in the Senate. But those are four different things, okay? There's a new CNN poll conducted by SSRS, which says that 41% of the country now wants Donald Trump impeached and removed from office. It's good that they're asking the question in that way. Now, this is actually not the record high for Donald Trump's presidency. The same poll back in September had 47% of the country wanting Trump impeached. In December, 43% of the country wanted Donald Trump impeached and removed. And it dropped into the mid-30s, and now it's back up to 41%. The most important takeaway is that this is a lot. It's not normal that 41% of the country wants the president to be impeached and removed. And not surprisingly, the recent rise in those numbers is driven primarily by Democrats and some centrist independents. Democrats now 76% support impeaching Donald Trump. That's up 8 points from April. So this tells us a few important things. Number one, it's just not normal for more than 40% of the country to believe the president should be impeached. Even during the hyper-partisan insanity of the Obama administration, the highest impeachment support ever for Barack Obama was 33%. Even for Bill Clinton, who was impeached, impeachment support never surpassed 30%, if I recall correctly. The current president has 41% impeachment and removal support. That is massive. Number two, support for impeachment, especially among Democrats and independents, seems to be correlated with the number of prominent Democratic lawmakers who are calling for impeachment proceedings. Now, we don't know for sure if national support for impeachment is going up because more prominent Democrats are calling for impeachment. I don't know if more prominent Democrats are calling for impeachment because they see that more Americans are supporting it. So I don't know about which way the causation goes, if any, but it's a trend that's rising in parallel. They're correlated, at least. This is the most important thing to understand here. Do not let the Trump administration and right-wing media trick you into believing that it's no big deal that 41% of the country wants Trump impeached. Impeachment of a president of the United States has happened only, I believe, 3 times in the more than 240 years that the United States has been a country. That 41% support doing that is rare. And I believe that as more facts come out, if more Americans read the Mueller report, if an impeachment inquiry starts, which Bernie Sanders is now calling for, I'll talk about that after the break, the 41% number is going to go up. And what the Trump administration is going to insist on is this is just partisan nonsense. It's partisan, bad, angry Democrats. Once you get to 45%, 47%, 48%, mathematically, it cannot be just partisan Democrats. So do not let them trick you into thinking that this is no big deal. This is a big deal. There have been 3 impeachments in American history. I hope I'm getting that number right. And that more than 40% of the country wants that done to the current president is a massive, massive deal. We'll be posting a poll question about this on the David Pakman Show Instagram page. Please follow us there at David Pakman Show. And also, please follow me on Instagram at david.pakman. I am heading to Los Angeles after today's program. Later in the show, I will announce why. And I do believe it's the type of trip where you will want to be following me on Instagram at david.pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders, who you probably know is also running for president in 2020, is now calling for the House of Representatives to immediately start an impeachment inquiry into Donald Trump. And despite the fact that what he wants is an impeachment inquiry, there have been a ton of posts and discussions and comments online which initially said Bernie is calling for Trump's removal. And that's just not what Bernie did. Bernie is calling for the removal of Trump by voting him out in 2020. That's one way that Bernie Sanders is saying Donald Trump should be removed. But Bernie Sanders has only called for the beginning of an impeachment inquiry. That's step one in the impeachment process. Interestingly, this happened at a campaign rally late last week. It was not mentioned for days by media outlets. And when it was initially mentioned, a lot of the reaction to the story was completely misunderstanding what it is that Bernie Sanders said. So this is the right call that Bernie Sanders is making. And Bernie Sanders, like the David Pakman Show, like other shows, we all realize that the Republican Senate is not going to convict Donald Trump and actually remove him from office. But the facts support starting an impeachment inquiry, period. And that's why I'm glad Bernie's doing this. He said at this rally in Henderson, Nevada, quote, "I believe the House Judiciary Committee should begin impeachment inquiries. That is inquiries, not impeachment, to determine whether or not Trump has committed impeachable offenses." This is an important change, not because Bernie saying it will make impeachment more of a reality more quickly, but because it's starting to become a distraction. Does Bernie not think there should be an impeachment inquiry? What's wrong with Bernie? Why isn't Bernie willing to say it? Well, now Bernie Sanders has made it clear that he supports an impeachment inquiry. But I've got to make the same statement again that I've been saying for a while. An impeachment inquiry is not impeachment, and impeachment is not removal, okay? The process is inquiry during which there is testimony, investigation, debate by the House. If they determine that impeachment articles should be filed, those articles are then filed by the House. They require a majority, simple majority, 50% plus one of the 435 House members. Then there is a trial of sorts that the House puts forward all of the evidence they believe supports the impeachment of the president, at which point the Senate votes on whether to convict and remove the president or not. And to convict, you need 2/3 of the Senate. All we're talking about here, all that Bernie Sanders is talking about, is an impeachment inquiry. So there are a whole bunch of wrong reactions to this news. The first wrong reaction to this news is that many have said, oh, Bernie's calling for the removal of Trump. But that's not what he's doing. It's just not. It's wrong in two ways. Number one, Bernie's just calling for the inquiry, which happens before impeachment articles are even filed. And number two, even impeachment by the House wouldn't remove Trump. Only a conviction by the Senate would remove Trump. And it's not going to happen. OK, that's not the point. The point is we want to expose what Trump has done and potentially weaken him in 2020. There are others who are reacting to this saying Bernie's so weak. He's riding the fence. He's only calling for an inquiry. He should just buckle down and call for impeachment. It's a silly criticism. Bernie's a senator. Bernie would conceivably be one of the people voting on the trial that would be brought forth by these articles of impeachment if they were ever filed. It would be, in a sense, inappropriate for Bernie to say now, we must remove Trump. What most senators have been saying is that they believe either an inquiry should start or that the House should file articles. And then later, the Senate would ultimately be making the decision about how do they want to vote and do they get that 2/3 support. So Bernie's 100% correct here. He's saying do the inquiry. That's the required first step. It's great news. Maybe it'll put more pressure on people like Nancy Pelosi, who have been sort of hesitant to consider impeachment. And Bernie Sanders is, some people will criticize him for this, but I believe that the net positive benefit of him just saying this and getting it out of the way makes sense. I'm glad he did it. I agree. Let's start that inquiry as soon as humanly possible. So the California Democratic State Convention happened over the weekend, and there were some interesting things that happened, including a lot of booing of presidential candidates. I think you're going to like this. First of all, there's a guy running named John Delaney. He was a congressman in Maryland from 2013 until this year. He's polling almost zero, I think averaging, 0.5% to be exact. So he has no shot. But he showed up and he said Medicare for all might sound good, but it's not a good policy and it's not good politics. And he got booed so much that it actually got awkward. Take a look.
But we need, as Democrats, to build an economy that works. But it's got to be with smart policies. Medicare for all may sound good, but it's actually not good policy, nor is it good politics. I'm telling you. 100. We should have universal health care. We should have universal health care.
Seriously awkward moment because the booing just wouldn't stop. But I'm going to take a position on this that I know people are going to mishear and get angry with me about. But if he had tweaked what he said slightly, it would have actually been a really strong statement with which I'd agree. Because right now, there is huge momentum over Medicare for all. But as I've said before, Medicare for all is just one way to get universal coverage and healthcare to everyone. I've said before, I'm a supporter of Medicare for all over the system we have. And I'm a supporter of Medicare for all over lots of other ideas that have been presented, including, the public option as part of Obamacare or whatever else. But there are problems with Medicare. Medicare is not nearly a perfect system. Would I take it over what we have? Of course, 1,000,000 times over. But remember that 80% of the people who are on Medicare have something else in addition to Medicare because Medicare doesn't give them full coverage. Some people are working while on Medicare, so they have some kind of private employer-connected insurance. Some people who have Medicare are buying additional coverage through various supplement plans, or they're poor enough to get Medicaid in conjunction with Medicare. But the point is, Medicare for all isn't perfect. And if Delaney instead came in and said, listen, instead of saying Medicare for all is bad politics and bad policy, instead of saying my top priority is getting health care to everyone as soon as possible, and I will consider any system that gets us there, be it Medicare for all, a massive Medicaid expansion, a nationalization type system like in the UK, a state-based system that is similar to what Canada has at the province level. It doesn't matter, right? That would actually be a really great thing to hear from John Delaney, because sometimes, I agree, the left they get blinders on with Medicare for all when there are other options. And it's a perfectly reasonable debate to be had, to show up and to say, hey, this is bad policy and bad politics. He's a fool. He's a fool, and it's an idiotic way to present it. But there is actually a good discussion in there that we could have, which is Medicare is not perfect. And there are other countries that have different types of systems, which might be better if implemented in the United States. And we should consider all of them. We shouldn't rule any of it out. I've been talking about that. So huge mistake, strategic mistake by Delaney in a boneheaded way, really just putting his foot in his mouth. Then in comes John Hickenlooper at the same California Democratic Convention, another Democrat running with no support. He's polling 0.3%. Hickenlooper was the governor of Colorado from 2013 until this year. And he said, socialism is not the answer. And he got booed. Let's take a look at that clip.
But let me be clear. If we want to beat Donald Trump and achieve big progressive goals, socialism is not the answer. I was reelected in a purple state in 2014, one of the worst years for Democrats in a quarter century.
Okay, and the booing just went on from there. This is another dumb strategic mistake. I agree with Hickenlooper in that, for me, socialism is not the answer. I want to sort of take control of the capitalist system that we have and tweak and tailor it in the way that the Nordic countries and other Northern European countries have done, Denmark, Finland, whatever. These are capitalist countries that have said capitalism only goes so far, and we need to control it and rein it in for the benefit of everybody in our country to make sure people don't get left behind. So I agree with Hickenlooper, socialism is not the answer, but socialism's a non-starter, right? I mean, who's running on the socialization of the means of production, where workers own every business and there's no more private ownership of business? I'm not for that. Nobody's running on that, right? Why is the guy even attacking socialism at all? There's no candidates running on socialist policies. If it's an indirect attack on Bernie, okay, Bernie's running on social democratic ideas, like what we see in countries like Denmark and those other countries. When Trump yelled at his State of the Union speech, "We will never be a socialist country," and the Republicans clapped and went crazy, and some Republicans did too, I pointed out this is idiotic red meat because there is no serious risk that the United States is going to become a socialist country. The Democratic Party has almost no socialists in it. It's a straw man. It's a complete and total straw man. And similarly, when Hickenlooper shows up and says socialism is not the answer, who's he talking to? Like, okay, there were some people in the crowd who didn't like it. I would bet that even most of those people who think that they're socialists are actually social democrats. I know there are real socialists in the US. A lot of them don't even understand that they're actually social democrats. This is yet another one of these dumb strategic mistakes. Not that it matters for Hickenlooper because the guy has absolutely no shot. Talk about what you're for rather than socialism is not the answer, because who's talking about socialism? I know that in some polls, socialism is less unfavorably seen than it has been in a long time. Again, many of those people are talking about social democracy, but more importantly, even if socialism is less unpopular than it has been in a long time, which I agree it is. I mean, it's clear from the polls that that's the case. Socialism has been sort of reinvigorated in some sense. We're not fighting socialism. The Democratic primary is not a socialism versus capitalism primary. It's a how regulated of a capitalist system are we arguing that we should have? How much of the value created by capitalism do we believe should be assigned to improving society and the economy for everyone, regardless of their ability to pay and their economic circumstances? He's having a debate with effectively nobody when it comes to the content of the Democratic Party. Dumb move by Hickenlooper and Delaney, but very little risk since neither of them have a shot. Am I misinterpreting this? Let me know what you think. Make sure to give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So we've been tracking the rise of Elizabeth Warren in the 2020 Democratic primary for a while now. I already told you that Joe Biden has had a sort of up and down polling sequence. Bernie Sanders had some ups and downs in his polling. Elizabeth Warren, on the other hand, has had a slow but steady climb from the sort of 4 to 5% range to roughly 10% now, which is where she is as of the latest polls. And she's been doing it not with extraordinary flash or viral videos or whatever else. She's been doing it by campaigning substantively and doing interviews where she lays out substantive policy, doing town halls and talking to all sorts of voters, including right-wing voters in red parts of the country. And I like the fact that this is what she's doing. I don't know if it'll carry her to the nomination, but I like the fact that this is her approach. And over the weekend, she did a town hall in Oakland, California, where 6,500 people showed up to see Elizabeth Warren. This was at Laney College on Friday night. 6,500 people waited in line outside the venue. The entire thing was delayed an hour because there were so many people trying to get in. And once again, it was a super substantive event based on policy and ideas. Elizabeth Warren talked about her proposal to end corruption, her proposals to cut money in politics, proposals that would directly help the middle class, actually, not like Trump's tax plan, student loan debt proposals, gun violence related proposals. The only thing about it that you could criticize is that because it was so busy and it started so late, she ended up not taking questions from the audience. So it ended up being more of a rally or speech than it was a town hall. So I want to give you the pros and cons of what's going on here with Elizabeth Warren. So as someone who has been running a substantive issue-based campaign, I love to see Elizabeth Warren draw these types of crowds. 6,500 for someone who is, yes, she's a well-known senator, but she is not the sort of cult of personality, celebrity that some other people in politics are. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I've also been critical of Elizabeth Warren before, even though I love her policy ideas, that she is not the most likable or the most relatable candidate at the large level, I have seen her relate to people individually in a way that is quite relatable and makes her more likable. But to see a huge crowd of people fired up by campaign finance reform or ending foreign influence on our elections by foreign countries, dealing with structural inequality, it's awesome to see people fired up by that and turning out by the thousands to hear her talk about that. And so there are two ways that this could go for Elizabeth Warren in the next few months. If Elizabeth Warren can keep gaining the 1 to 1.5 percentage points per month in the polls, which is roughly what she's been doing for the last several months, if she can do that and outlast the people that are polling 1%, the people that are polling 2%, who are going to start dropping out either by choice or by force as the Democratic National Committee's primary debate requirements go into force after the second debate and then in the third and fourth debates, she could end up in a really strong position by the time the fourth debate is all said and done in October. And then it's a question of who does the progressive vote sort of coalesce around? Does it coalesce around Bernie? Does it coalesce around Elizabeth Warren, who I believe clearly are the non-Biden frontrunners at this point in time? Could change, but that's what it's looking like right now. That's one way it could go, and maybe the debates would help her achieve that. On the other hand, though, as I've said, what I see as Elizabeth Warren's biggest weakness is she doesn't debate very well, especially in a debate with a whole bunch of other people. I don't know. The first debate, there's so many people, they're splitting it into two, like a first A and first B debate, and I believe it's random. I don't know how many people will be on each one of those debate stages. I don't 100% know how she gets the exact right type of attention in that format that will advance her campaign significantly. And part of it is she actually can go deep on a lot of these issues, right? She's got the right ideas. She has the experience. She clearly has the intelligence. The fact that the worst Trump has been able to do with her is call her Pocahontas and talk about her Native American DNA fiasco, which was a fiasco the way it was handled, that actually suggests to me that Republicans are kind of scared of her. When you look at some of the issues that the country is dealing with right now, and you look at Elizabeth Warren's experience, her work in consumer and financial, the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, when you look at her work on income inequality, it lines right up with some of the biggest problems that we're facing in the United States. And the fact that all the right has been able to do is say Pocahontas suggests to me she could do really well against Donald Trump, not that Bernie wouldn't as well. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how does her message come through in a debate, because it does not allow, especially with however many people, is it going to be 8 or 10 for each of the two debates? I don't know. I don't know if she can go into the depth that is required for her to appeal to people. If you go to her rallies, she's going into detail about her proposals and talking to voters about them. And that is part of why she has been gaining. We'll see if that translates to the debates. And for me, it's more a question of the dynamics of the Democratic primary and just realizing that in these large, massive formats, she's not the most relatable. She's not a particularly good debater. Once we start the debate phase, which is in a few weeks, it's the debates themselves that are going to influence the next several months of the campaign and probably have a significant role in defining who ultimately wins the primary. My concern is it's not Elizabeth Warren's area of expertise, but I'm sure that she knows this and that she's preparing. In person, she relates really well to people, maybe less so in debates with 10 other people. I am curious to see what people in the audience think about this. You know, unlike Hillary Clinton, who narrowly lost in 2016, Warren is actually further to the left. Unlike our 2016 nominee, Hillary Clinton, Warren doesn't have the investigative baggage around her and the admittedly fake but impactful scandals that Hillary had, like Benghazi and the email stuff. So there's every indication to me that Republicans would rather not have Donald Trump run against Elizabeth Warren. But let me know what you think, and let me know what you believe the debates will bring. I know that there are people who vehemently disagree with me about what the debates will bring and how they will affect polling, but let me know. Okay, big announcement today. After the program today, I will be going to Boston's Logan Airport, and I will be flying, hopefully nonstop, unless there is a change to the itinerary of my plane, to Los Angeles, California, because tomorrow, Wednesday, I will be appearing live, I think it's live, on the Joe Rogan program. This is extremely exciting. Have been trying to put this together with Joe for a while. I was not planning on taking time off from the show this week or anytime soon, really up until the 4th of July break, because I was just gone. And this came together very quickly. The flights came together very quickly. June 5th, Wednesday, June 5th at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I will be on with Joe Rogan. It will be a wide-ranging and informative conversation. I am going in excited to talk to Joe about what am I for as a progressive leftist. And I think it is a great opportunity to talk about what it is that I stand for. What are my views? We will talk about media. We will talk about online media culture and YouTubers and censorship and platforming, hopefully, and all of this stuff. And probably many other things I have no idea about, as many Joe Rogan conversations tend to sort of take a life of their own. So I will be away from the show Wednesday, Thursday. And the plan is, and I have such bad luck with flights that I always say the plan is that I will be flying back to Boston Thursday and we'll be back on the show Friday, and we will do a full regular Friday show with news stories and audience questions and live calls and all of that stuff. If it changes, I will make sure that Benjamin Dixon, the guest host that we are going to have in, lets you know about that. Ben has very graciously and on relatively short notice agreed to fill in for me on Wednesday and Thursday while I am away. I will be appearing on some other shows as well. But the main attraction is going to be appearing with Joe Rogan tomorrow, Wednesday. So wish me luck. I am sort of nervous about it. It's a big audience. I want to make the best possible impression for what I do and for what my views are. But all I can do is show up and talk to Joe and do the best I can. So that is what's going on. Our membership audience learned about this on yesterday's bonus show, telling everybody today. So that's where I will be. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else to mention about this. I guess not. I will be, I have some interesting lunches and dinners scheduled while in Los Angeles with some progressive personalities that many of you will recognize. So follow my Instagram, david.pacman. Follow the adventure. I'll probably be posting some pictures from some of these meetups that I think you'll find very interesting. Meetups, not audience meetups, but just meeting up with other Los Angeles-based progressive online media personalities. We have a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. This voicemail is sort of hard to understand, but it's a question I've never gotten before, and it's kind of an interesting one, so let's take a listen and figure it out.
Hi, Davey. I'd waited you in front of a studio audience now, so I don't want to hold you. But I was just wondering if you ever considered the life of the high seas, the risk and the gamble, you know, going out on the seas, drinking rum, not knowing what's going to come next. It's a really good life, and I just think you might take a day away from the studios and talk shows to take a bit of it. I don't know. Hard loss for me, I guess. See you when I see you, Davey. Have a good life. Tell Cam Mirth I wish her pleasures, and tell everyone in your family that I wish them pleasures and hard life, mate.
Okay. I have not considered a life on the high seas. First of all, to get to what are I don't know where the high seas start and you're no longer just like slightly offshore, but I think that I would need more than a day to make it to the high seas and then back, although maybe I'm wrong about that. I tend to get seasick, so no, boat-related stuff is not great for me. The last time I was on a boat, it actually was fine. I was on a friend's yacht down in the Florida area, and it was not bumpy is not even the right word. It was not, is turbulent the right word? It wasn't very wavy, I guess is what I'm saying. And I felt fine, fortunately. But even like once I went to the Yucatan and took a short boat ride from mainland Mexico out to one of the islands. I think it was about 30, 35 minutes. And the swaying back and forth really was not making me feel too well. So I have never been on like a long cruise or anything because it's not for me. I would consider doing it if I knew. Oh, actually, no. The last time, I'm so stupid. The last time I was on a boat was with producer Lewis on a huge cruise ship that was repurposed as a ferry between Helsinki, Finland, and Tallinn, Estonia. 9-10 months ago, I did that. And it was such a huge boat on such a calm stretch of water that I felt completely fine, although I did take my Dramamine just to be sure. But anyway, that's basically my water-related experience, and I'm not going to be a merchant marine anytime soon or any of those things. And that's basically it. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We will talk about the Texas governor signing a state ban on red light traffic cameras. We will talk about the FDA starting to think about what to do with CBD products, including CBD oils, which are getting more and more popular, and much, much more. Great bonus show for you today. 2 ways to become a member and get access to the bonus show. Rather, 2 ways to access the bonus show. Number 1, become a member at joinpacman.com. Regular prices, I think, are very reasonable. You can use the coupon code THISIS2020 to save 40%. Option number 2, make a Patreon pledge at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Both give you instant access to the bonus show. If you were a bonus show viewer, you would have known a day early about my upcoming appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, which I announced publicly today. I announced yesterday on the bonus show. So become a member, become a patron, and I will speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.